The story begins on an ordinary morning, the kind of morning where people wake up expecting life to move in its usual, predictable way. Parents got their children ready for school, packed small lunchboxes, and shared quick goodbyes before rushing into busy routines. Nobody imagined that this day would quietly mark the beginning of something far beyond human understanding. At first, the disappearances were so small that they barely stood out. A single child missing from a playground. Another who never arrived home after school. A family confused, believing their child might have wandered somewhere. Local officers searching nearby areas, telling the parents not to panic because children sometimes hide or get lost. But soon, the disappearances became too many, too close together, and too similar to ignore. It happened in cities, towns, villages, and even remote countryside areas. Children vanished while walking just a few steps away from trusted adults. There were no signs of struggle, no footprints leading away, no broken objects, nothing suspicious left behind. It was as if the missing simply dissolved into air. Families tried to stay hopeful, telling themselves there must be some explanation. But deep inside, a fear began to grow, spreading from home to home like a shadow nobody could escape. Governments around the world first treated the issue quietly, hoping to find a logical cause before public panic could spread. Teams of experts searched forests, lakes, abandoned buildings, and every possible corner. But every search ended the same way. Nothing found. The first real clue came from people who lived in rural areas, far from bright city lights. They spoke about strange lights in the sky on the nights before the disappearances. Not the normal kind seen from airplanes or shooting stars. These were long pillars of white light, perfectly straight, stretching down from the sky to the ground. Some said the light stayed still, as if scanning the earth. Others said it moved gently, almost like it was searching for something. There were also reports of silent shapes in the sky. They weren't round like modern drones or airplanes. They were sharp and geometric, with glowing edges that formed patterns people could barely describe. Most who saw them thought their eyes were playing tricks. Some decided not to tell anyone, afraid they would be called crazy. But when children started vanishing on nights when these lights appeared, people finally spoke up. News channels began to report the strange events. At first, hosts tried to stay calm, presenting everything as mysterious incidents under investigation. But as parents shared their experiences crying, holding pictures, begging for answers, the world started to feel unstable. Something was happening that humanity had never seen before. A small group of parents decided they couldn't just sit and wait for officials to act. They connected with each other online, sharing details about where their children disappeared, what they saw, and how it happened. They compared the times, the locations, and the descriptions of lights in the sky. Slowly, a pattern began to appear. The disappearances always happened when the strange shapes were sighted above short, quiet areas, empty roads, playgrounds at dusk, small fields, or calm neighborhoods where nobody expected danger. And in almost every case, people nearby reported seeing that same silent light beam. It was becoming impossible to think this was caused by humans. No organization on Earth could make people vanish with such precision, leaving no marks, no sound, and no trace. The real turning point came from a group of astronomers using a high-power orbital telescope. They were observing routine data when they noticed an object rising through Earth's atmosphere. At first, it looked like a blur, but when they sharpened the image, what they saw shocked them. It wasn't a satellite or a rocket. It was something enormous, moving quietly, with a shape no human nation had ever designed. And inside that object, tiny heat signatures, many of them were visible. Those signatures matched human body temperatures. When the discovery reached world leaders, there was no more room to deny the truth. The missing children were not lost. They were taken. Still, authorities resisted announcing it publicly. They feared global panic. But secrets do not stay hidden forever. A low-quality video leaked online, showing a glowing structure rising above the clouds. Even though the image wasn't clear, it was enough to ignite anxiety across the world. People demanded answers. They filled streets, held signs, and begged every official to tell the truth. As pressure grew, governments finally admitted that the disappearances were linked to unknown aerial phenomena. They used careful words, avoiding anything that would sound too alarming, but people understood anyway. Something from outside Earth had taken their children. Across the world, a heavy silence fell. Families stayed indoors. Schools closed. Neighbors gathered to keep watch at night. Children were kept under strict supervision. And yet, even with all this caution, the disappearances continued. One evening, a parent from a small town noticed something unusual. Their child was playing just a few steps away, under the soft glow of a streetlight. Everything was peaceful until a faint humming sound filled the air. It wasn't loud, just a soft vibration, almost like the buzzing of distant electricity. The parent looked up and saw a thin white line falling from the sky, slow but steady. In the next breath, the light expanded just a little and the child vanished. The parent ran toward the spot, shouting and calling for help. People nearby gathered, searching in every direction, but there was nothing to find. The ground was untouched. The air was still. It was as if the world had simply swallowed the child. Incidents like this repeated everywhere, becoming painfully common. People filmed the lights whenever they appeared, but the recordings always came out blurry or distorted, as if the technology couldn't capture the exact details. Despite the fear, people formed support groups to comfort each other. They shared stories, held candlelight gatherings, and refused to let the missing be forgotten. The shared pain connected them, turning strangers into family. They believed that as long as they stayed united, they could find a way to bring their children back home. Meanwhile, scientists continued their research. They didn't sleep, barely ate, and spent endless hours studying signals from the sky. They discovered that the strange shapes moved in patterns, too deliberate to be random. Whatever was taking the children was intelligent, organized, and capable of traveling between Earth and space without detection. A theory began to grow among the scientists, one they were almost afraid to admit. The lights, the disappearances, the enormous structure observed leaving the atmosphere, everything pointed toward the involvement of a powerful civilization beyond Earth. This civilization wasn't just visiting. It had a purpose. And humanity didn't yet know why. One night, when the sky was clear and calm, the most undeniable proof arrived. A large observatory captured a full sequence of an object leaving Earth. The recording showed a smooth, angular structure rising slowly through the upper atmosphere before disappearing into darkness. Scientists watched the data again and again, and the heat signatures inside, small, warm, human-sized, were unmistakable. The world changed that day. People finally realized that humanity was no longer alone, and the children were somewhere far beyond Earth's reach. They felt powerless, frightened, unsure what to do. But beneath the fear, something else grew: determination. The human spirit, shaken but not broken, refused to give up. Parents, families, scientists, and even complete strangers silently made a promise to themselves. They would not rest until every missing child was found. And even though nobody said it out loud, everyone felt the same question burning inside. Why were the children taken? And what did this unknown galactic force want with them? Humanity didn't know yet, but they were going to find out no matter the cost. The children did not wake up to the familiar smell of their home or the soft sound of morning birds. Instead, they opened their eyes to a strange, dim light glowing from walls that didn't look like any material found on Earth. The surface around them was smooth, almost like polished stone, yet warm to the touch. The air felt clean, but strangely still, as if the room itself was breathing in silence. Most of the children sat quietly at first, trying to understand what was happening. Some whispered to each other, confused. Others wrapped their arms around themselves, hoping they were dreaming. But no matter how many times they blinked or rubbed their eyes, the strange room remained the same dot. There were no windows, only a long curved wall and a softly shining ceiling that shifted color from silver to pale blue. Every few minutes, a gentle hum passed through the room, making the floor vibrate lightly under their feet. It wasn't frightening, just unusual, like the kind of vibration felt inside an airplane during takeoff. Eventually, a doorway opened without any sound. The wall simply separated in the middle, sliding apart like liquid metal. Outside the doorway stood a tall figure unlike anything the children had seen before. It wasn't threatening, but clearly not human. Its movements were smooth and careful, almost too graceful to belong to a living creature. The figure had a long cloak, made of shimmering fabric that flowed behind it like water. Its face was calm, with large dark eyes that reflected the glowing light. When it spoke, its voice wasn't loud or harsh. It was soft, steady, and carried a tone that almost felt soothing. The children couldn't fully understand the words yet. First, the language was nothing like anything from Earth. But as the figure continued speaking, the room lights shifted again, and a strange clarity entered their minds. The words slowly became understandable, as if the language was translating itself inside their thoughts. The figure wasn't there to hurt them. Instead, it welcomed them calmly, saying they were safe. But the children did not feel safe. They felt lost, afraid, and far from everything they loved. They didn't know where they were, who these beings were, or why they were taken. The tall figure motioned gently, asking them to follow. Some children hesitated, their feet frozen in place. Others stepped slowly toward the door, hoping to understand more. Once outside the room, they found themselves in a massive hallway with walls that curved like tunnels in every direction. The entire structure felt alive, as if the ship itself was breathing and moving. This was no building on Earth. It was clear now. They were inside an enormous starship dot. As they walked, they saw more of the tall figures moving around, all wearing similar flowing garments. Some carried objects that floated beside them, moving as if controlled by invisible strings. Others seemed to be adjusting glowing panels along the walls that changed color when touched. Nothing looked familiar. Every surface was smooth and bright, with patterns that pulsed softly like veins of light. It was beautiful in a strange way, but also overwhelming. The children were guided into another chamber where smaller, gentler beings greeted them. These ones looked different, shorter, with softer features and large eyes that showed emotion much more clearly. One of these beings bent down, making itself level with the children's height, and offered them a round object that floated slightly above its hand. When the children touched it, warm light spread through their skin. It calmed them instantly, easing their panic. Whatever the object was, it seemed to soothe fear the way a hug or a familiar voice might. Over time, the children realized these gentle beings were helpers or caretakers. They offered food, simple white cubes that melted in the mouth and tasted slightly sweet. They provided soft beds that shaped themselves to whoever lay on them. They even gave the children small glowing stones that projected images of stars and galaxies on the ceiling like a moving night sky. But no matter how comforting the environment became, the children still missed home. They missed their families. They missed the world they belonged to. And every night, as they lay under the moving stars on the ceiling, they wished someone from Earth would come for them. Eventually, The children began to overhear conversations between the tall leaders and the smaller caretakers. The words weren't always clear, since the beings sometimes spoke in their natural language. But the children picked up enough translated speech to understand that these beings belonged to something called the Xanthari Empire. From what they understood, the empire was ancient, so old that even their own history had become almost like legend. They controlled hundreds of star systems, keeping strict rules and order throughout their territory. Every member of their society had a role and was expected to behave exactly as the empire required. But something had changed recently. Something had troubled the empire enough to make them come all the way to Earth. The children finally learned the truth during a calm explanation from one of the caretakers, whose gentle expression made the moment feel heavy yet honest. According to their words, humans had qualities that the Xanthari lacked. Humans were unpredictable, emotional, creative, and full of ideas that came from instinct rather than strict logic. To the empire, humans were different. Not lesser, not greater, just unpredictable in ways they couldn't understand. And unpredictability was something the Xanthari feared deeply, because they built their entire galaxy on control and stability. So the empire captured the children not to harm them, but to study them. They believed human children held the purest form of creativity and emotion, unshaped by rigid rules. They wanted to understand these traits, hoping it would help them strengthen their empire or prepare for threats they believed might come one day. But what they didn't realize was that taking children from their families was a mistake that would stir something powerful in humanity. While the children were being observed, Earth was not silent. Far from it. Back home, governments were uniting like never before. Scientists were analyzing every signal, every strange reading from space, every piece of data from the night skies. Nations that once competed now shared technology freely, desperate to work together. Experts who studied the leaked telescope images discovered that the shape leaving Earth was unlike anything they had ever imagined. They compared it with ancient patterns found in old star charts, but nothing matched. Whatever this empire was, it had been hiding in the shadows of the universe for long before humans even learned to walk. And now, they had taken Earth's children. This decision awakened something deep inside humanity. Fear, yes, but also determination, unity, and a burning desire to bring the children back home. People from all over the world put aside their differences and focused on one goal: this strange technology. Left behind during the abductions became key to the new efforts. Scientists realized that the bright pillars of light used during the captures had left behind small particles that didn't match any known material on Earth. These particles glowed softly, like tiny pieces of starlight trapped in solid form. Researchers studied them around the clock, trying to understand their purpose. Slowly, they began to notice patterns, energy structures, and shapes that didn't act like anything found in Earth's technology. It was the first real proof that humanity might be able to reverse engineer something from a much more advanced civilization. It wasn't easy. Progress was slow, but the determination to save the missing children became a force stronger than any difficulty. The children, unaware of the details, felt a quiet hope growing inside them. They didn't know how or when, but they believed the people they loved would come for them. Humans might not have ships like the Xanthari, or technology that glowed like starlight, but they had something else, something deeper. They had the will to fight for the ones they cared about. And even though the alien empire saw humans as unpredictable, they had underestimated one truth. When humans loved someone, they never gave up. The children may have been far away, lost among the stars, but they were not forgotten. And somewhere on Earth, under the same sky that now looked different, humanity was beginning to rise with a new purpose. Because no matter how powerful the Xanthari Empire was, They had just made the greatest mistake possible. They had taken the wrong children. The days after the children vanished felt heavier than anything humanity had experienced before. People woke up with fear already sitting in their hearts. Every sunrise felt the same quiet streets, worried faces, and a world waiting for a sign of what to do next. Even children who were still on Earth stayed indoors, holding tightly to their parents and refusing to go far from home. The world had changed overnight, and everyone felt it. While ordinary people tried to live their lives, world leaders and scientists worked endlessly behind closed doors. There were hundreds of meetings each day, some calm, some full of tension. One thing was clear. Earth was facing something completely new, something far beyond human knowledge. The telescope images of the giant ship left everyone speechless. Not because it looked dangerous, but because its size and silence were beyond imagination. How could something so massive enter Earth's atmosphere without anyone hearing it? How could it leave without creating shock waves or burning through the sky? Humanity realized just how small it was compared to whatever was out there. For months, scientists studied the strange particles that were left behind after each abduction. These particles didn't behave like anything on Earth. They pulsed with energy that seemed alive, changing shape under different lights. Researchers built new machines just to handle them. Because normal tools couldn't even measure their temperature. Small breakthroughs began to happen. A group of engineers discovered that the particles responded to electrical signals. Another team found that they produced tiny vibrations that could be mapped into patterns. These patterns looked almost like symbols, complex shapes that held meaning, almost like a language. It became clear that these particles were part of the technology used by the alien empire. They were clues, pieces of a puzzle that humanity was slowly putting together. A secret global team was formed, made up of the brightest minds from all nations. They called themselves the Human Defense Coalition, though the public didn't know the name yet. The coalition worked underground, away from the public eye, because they knew the world wasn't ready for more fear. The coalition's goal was simple, but nearly impossible. Understand alien technology, build ships capable of leaving Earth, and find the missing children somewhere in the endless galaxy. The first major success came when a group of scientists learned to activate one of the strange energy particles. When they sent a strong electrical pulse through it, the particle lit up with a soft glow, then projected a small hologram, a tiny floating shape that rotated in the air. It wasn't a map or a message, but it was the first sign that Earth could interact with alien tech. Scientists spent weeks experimenting, building larger devices from scratch. Eventually, they managed to create a stable energy source, powered partly by the alien particles. It was small, only enough to light a room, but it was the beginning of something great. Once they understood how to power things, they moved to propulsion, how to move something using alien energy. The experiments were risky. Machines overheated. Circuits burned. Entire labs filled with bright flashes as devices failed. But failure didn't stop them. In fact, it encouraged them to try harder. Meanwhile, back in space, the children were adapting to life on the Zentari ship. They still felt scared and confused, but now they understood more about their surroundings. The caretakers taught them basic words of the Zentari language. The walls of the ship changed color to match their moods, as if the ship itself was trying to comfort them. Even so, the children missed home every single day. They missed the smell of fresh air, the feeling of sunlight on their faces, and the warmth of being with their families. Nothing could replace that. Sometimes, when the children spoke among themselves, they wondered if anyone on Earth even knew where they were. They questioned whether their families had given up. But deep down, in the quiet moments before sleep, each child believed the same thing. Someone was coming. Someone would find them. Back on Earth, the coalition finally created Something remarkable, a prototype of a human-made starship. It wasn't beautiful, and it wasn't perfect. It looked like a rough mixture of human metal and alien energy coils, but it worked. It could lift off the ground, hover, and stay stable. It was just a small ship, but it proved that humanity was capable of reaching for the stars. The next step was much harder, achieving faster than light travel, or something close to it. The alien particles showed strange behavior when exposed to magnetic fields, bending space in tiny, almost invisible ways. Scientists noticed that the space around the particles compressed and expanded differently compared to normal physics. This gave them an idea. If they could amplify that effect, maybe they could create a bubble around a ship something that could push it through space faster than human technology ever allowed before. It took months of trial and error. Some experiments were dangerous. Machines exploded. Labs had to be evacuated. But every failure taught them something new. Finally, one night, after countless attempts, the first successful warp bubble flickered into existence around a test device. It lasted only 3 seconds before collapsing, but those 3 seconds changed everything. The coalition celebrated, but quietly. They didn't announce anything yet. They wanted to be fully prepared before telling the world that they could chase the alien empire. The public, however, sensed that something was happening. Rumors spread online about strange tests, bright lights in the sky, and new construction near gizzards and oceans. People started whispering one sentence over and over. The humans are preparing for something. One night, something unexpected happened. A small Xanthari drone entered Earth's atmosphere. It wasn't hostile. It didn't emit harmful radiation. It simply floated above a forest, almost as if observing the planet. A group of citizens saw it and filmed it. The footage showed the drone hovering silently before shooting straight up into the sky, vanishing in seconds. The video spread across social media faster than any news story ever had. People around the world watched it in disbelief. For the first time, the Centauri presence felt real, not just a theory. It reminded everyone that the abductors could return any time. This pushed humanity's determination even further. Within a year after the abductions, the coalition completed the construction of the first long-distance human starship. It was named simply the Horizon. Horizon wasn't as advanced as the Centauri ships. It couldn't bend space as smoothly. It couldn't move silently. But it was strong, fast, and built with one purpose: to bring the children home. The ship carried a small crew of trained astronauts, engineers, and scientists. Each person had volunteered, knowing the mission was dangerous. They didn't know what they would find in space. They didn't know how powerful the Empire truly was. But they went anyway, because the thought of children lost among the stars was something no human could accept. When the Horizon launched, millions of people watched from around the world. Crowds stood in open fields, on rooftops, in parks, and even on highways. Families held each other tightly. Some cried, some prayed. Some simply stared at the sky with hope shining in their eyes. The ship rose slowly at first, then faster, glowing with bright light from the alien energy coils. It disappeared into the atmosphere, leaving behind a long trail that sparkled like dust from a comet. The world cheered. Humanity had finally entered the galactic stage, but their mission wasn't easy. Once in space, the Horizon encountered magnetic storms, strange signals, and unfamiliar star patterns. They were traveling into regions no human had ever seen. Every moment felt like stepping deeper into a vast, silent ocean. Then something remarkable happened. The ship picked up a faint signal, weak, almost disappearing, but clearly artificial. It was a repeating pulse, steady and rhythmic, like a heartbeat in the dark. The scientists analyzed it for hours before realizing the truth. The signal was coming from one of the Xanthari ships, For the first time, humanity had a path to follow, and far away on a massive alien vessel, the missing children suddenly felt a strange warmth in their hearts, like something familiar was finally getting closer. Humanity had begun its journey, and they were coming. Life inside the Xanthari Empire no longer felt as silent and controlled as it once did. Something had begun to change, and the change started with the children. They had been on the alien ship long enough to understand the layout, the routines, and even the emotions of the beings around them. The Xanthari were intelligent and powerful, but they followed rules so strictly that they often ignored things that didn't fit into their system. That was where the children's strength quietly grew. Even though they were frightened, they had something the Xanthari could not measure: hope, imagination, and a deep longing for home. These feelings brought them together, stronger than ever. They whispered plans late at night when the caretakers rested, using simple gestures so the overhead sensors wouldn't detect clear words. At first, their plans were small. They hid objects, distracted caretakers, and observed which hallways were watched the least. The Xanthari caretakers were gentle but firm. They were told to keep the children safe, but not to treat them harshly. They followed instructions from the tall leaders who believed studying human emotions would help them strengthen their empire. The leaders didn't imagine the children would work together so naturally or plan anything so organized. To the empire, children were simple beings. To humanity, children were anything but simple. One of the first things the children noticed was that the smaller caretakers were different from the leaders. They showed feelings, curiosity, worry, kindness, even though they tried to hide them. Some of them even seemed to enjoy the children's presence. These caretakers belonged to the lower class of the empire, assigned the gentler tasks. They were taught to follow orders, never question anything, and respect the strict hierarchy. But the children's bright energy slowly affected them. The caretakers didn't understand human laughter, yet they found themselves drawn to it. They didn't understand human tears, but they felt uneasy whenever a child cried. Some caretakers started bending rules in small ways, letting the children explore certain rooms, allowing them extra time in the observation chamber, or ignoring tiny mistakes. These small cracks in the empire's discipline created openings. The children learned to use Dot as weeks passed. The children discovered something important. The Xanthari Empire was not united the way it looked on the outside. Many lower-class workers felt trapped in the same rigid system that held the children. They wanted freedom too, but they had no idea what freedom even meant. The empire had taken away choice from them long ago, leaving only obedience. The children became the spark of something the Xanthari had never experienced: doubt. They realized the ship was enormous, much larger than they first thought. Hallways stretched like roads, connecting different sectors. There were rooms filled with glowing crystals, chambers where tall leaders communicated with other ships, and quiet meditation spaces reserved for elders. The children explored whenever they could, pretending to be curious while secretly memorizing paths and patterns. They noticed the ship followed a daily cycle. Lights dimmed at certain hours. Some hallways shut down. Sensors moved slower at night. Machines entered rest mode. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough to plan something bigger. The breakthrough came when one child discovered that touching two specific panels at the same time made the wall screen flicker. It was a glitch, small, but useful. With this glitch, they could temporarily hide their movement in the ship's monitoring system. When the children tested it, they could walk down one hallway for about 10 seconds without being recorded. 10 seconds wasn't long, but it was long enough to slip into restricted rooms. The children didn't immediately use the glitch. They waited, watched, and learned. They wanted to understand everything before taking a bigger step. Humans on Earth were unpredictable, yes, but human children? They were the most unpredictable of all. Their creativity was something no alien could measure or calculate. Meanwhile, news of humanity's first starship Horizon began spreading across the galaxy through secret whispers. Nobody knew exactly how the message leaked, perhaps intercepted. Signals, perhaps careless chatter between workers, or maybe a few Xanthari who no longer fully supported their leaders. Regardless of how it spread, the rumor reached the Empire. Humans were coming. When the tall leaders of the ship heard this, they did not panic. They gathered calmly and studied the information. To them, humanity was technologically inferior. They believed no human ship could threaten the Empire, not even a small part of it. What they didn't understand was that humans were not searching for battle. They were searching for their children. The Xanthari believed taking the children was a strategic move. They didn't consider the emotional force that would push humanity to cross the stars. They didn't know how far a parent would go for their child. The Empire had always considered emotions a weakness. They were about to learn they were wrong. Back on the ship, the children noticed the tall leaders meeting more often. The atmosphere changed. Guards moved more frequently. Sensors stayed active longer. Lights flickered red at times, signaling alert mode. The children sensed tension. Something was happening outside, something big. One night, when the ship was in its quiet cycle, the children decided to take their plan further. They gathered in a small chamber where the walls didn't monitor sound. They touched the two panels. At the exact moment, causing the nearby screen to glitch. With their hearts pounding, they slipped into a restricted hallway. The hallway led to a control room filled with floating screens and glowing surfaces. The room was empty, meant to be, used only during emergencies. The children knew they didn't have much time. They scanned the screens and soon found something breathtaking: a galactic map. The map showed thousands of stars, swirling colors, and endless space. But the children weren't looking for beauty. They were searching for something familiar. After minutes of searching, one child pointed at a tiny blue circle far across the map. Earth. They had found home. Excitement filled their bodies, but they had to stay calm. They didn't fully understand the controls, but they did understand symbols. They saw starship routes, communication centers, and something that looked like the Empire's command structure. They also found a schedule movements of different ships, including the one they were on. The children memorized everything they could before the sensors came back online. They rushed back to their quarters, slipping through hallways just in time before the ship's system restored. That night, they whispered more than ever. They talked about Earth, the map, the Empire, and the roots. They didn't know it yet, but their actions would soon shake the Empire in ways no one expected. Meanwhile, the Horizon continued its journey, following the faint signal through dark space. The crew faced storms of cosmic dust, strange magnetic waves, and areas of complete darkness. But they kept going. Every challenge reminded them why they were there: to bring the children home. One evening, the Horizon picked up another signal. This one was stronger, more clear. It wasn't a message. It was a location. The children had unknowingly created a tiny disturbance in the Xanthari ship's communication system when exploring the control room. That disturbance left a trail, a signal the Horizon could follow. Humanity was closer than ever. Back on the fake Xanthari ship, the children's growing boldness created noticeable disruptions. The younger caretakers felt confused. They sensed the children were hiding something. At the same time, they admired the children's courage. Some caretakers began questioning the Empire's decision to take children at all. They wondered if the Empire had done something wrong. Small debates started among workers. Soft arguments. Conversations held in shadows. For the first time in thousands of years, the Empire felt cracks forming within. The tall leaders noticed the shifts. They saw the caretakers acting differently. the workers communicating quietly, and the children carrying secret smiles. They increased security, but it was too late. The children had already planted something powerful. A new idea. The idea that the empire was not perfect. The idea that things could change. The idea that freedom was possible. The children didn't start a rebellion with weapons or violence. They started it with their spirit, their hope, their courage to do what no Xanthari dared to try. Their actions spread across the ship, reaching even distant sectors. Workers felt inspired. Some resisted small orders. Others slowed down their tasks. Rumors grew. Whispers traveled from one worker to another. The Xanthari Empire had always feared unpredictability. Now, unpredictability was growing from within. And somewhere not too far away, a human ship traveled through the darkness, carrying the determination of an entire planet. The children weren't alone anymore. Humanity was coming, and the galaxy was about to change forever. The galaxy had never felt so tense. Everywhere, people whispered about the final moment that was coming. Some were hopeful, some were scared, and some were simply tired of living under the shadow of the Empire. Even far from the conflict, in quiet corners of lonely planets, small radios and broken screens played the same messages again and again. Humanity was close. The children who had once been taken were still alive. The Empire was weakening. Things were changing faster than anyone could understand. On the human fleet, people moved with silent purpose. No one shouted, no one argued. Everyone understood what was at stake. For years, they had carried the weight of losing their children. They had fought battles they never asked for. They had crossed light years with determination that shocked even themselves. And now, after all that time, they were finally near the Empire's core world, where the children were believed to be held. Inside the main ship, command screens glowed with soft blue light. People walked quickly but calmly, their faces tight, but focused. They had prepared for this moment again and again. Yet even with all the planning, there was something about this final approach that made the ship feel heavier, as if the air itself understood the importance of what was about to happen. In a quiet corner of the ship, a group of parents sat together. They didn't speak much. Words weren't needed. They held each other's hands, shared quiet glances, and tried to stay strong for one another. Every one of them remembered the moment their child vanished. Every one of them remembered the helplessness they felt. And now, all of them carried a quiet hope mixed with fear, the hope of seeing their children again, and the fear of what shape those children might be in after years away from home. Meanwhile, on the Empire's main world, the children were no longer the same frightened kids who had once been taken. They had grown, not just in age but in courage and unity. They had lived in a world that never felt like theirs. They had learned how the Empire worked, how its leaders made decisions, how its systems functioned, and where its weaknesses lay. In the silence of night cycles, in the hidden corners where guards never bothered to check, the children had met again and again, whispering plans, sharing knowledge, and spreading hope to others that they knew the Empire feared humanity. Not because humans were stronger, not because humans had better technology, but because humans refused to accept the idea of being controlled. The Empire, with all its strict rules and layers of authority, could not understand how humans worked. It did not understand the power of emotion, connection, and stubborn determination. And that misunderstanding created cracks the children had used to start, small acts of resistance through the Empire's networks. Some of the younger kids still struggled. They missed home. They missed normal things like running outside, eating food made by someone who cared, and seeing familiar faces. But the older kids reassured them, guiding them like older siblings, promising that the time to go home was coming soon. On this day, the children felt something in the air, a strange vibration seemed to run through the halls of the Empire's facilities. Even the workers who usually walked with stiff, careful steps now moved faster, whispering to each other in nervous tones. The Empire's leaders had sensed the human fleet approaching, and the entire planet felt like it was holding its breath. In a large observation room, Empire officials stood around glowing displays, watching the approaching human ships. Their expressions were a mix of disbelief and frustration. They had underestimated humanity too many times. They had believed humans would give up, return to their planet, or fall apart under pressure. Instead, humanity had crossed the stars, formed alliances with oppressed species, and managed to break systems the Empire thought were unbreakable. Why do they fight so hard? One official whispered, "Because they care." Another replied quietly, almost with confusion, as if caring was a rare thing. Back on the children's side, a coded message appeared on a small panel inside one of the maintenance rooms. The children had connected this panel to a hidden communication network months earlier, just in case they ever received news from the outside. Now, the message that blinked on the screen made their hearts race. Humans were here. It wasn't a long message, just a short confirmation, but it was enough. The children exchanged determined looks. They knew what to do. They moved into action, not with fear, but with focus. They began releasing signals that disrupted the Empire's internal communication. They unlocked doors that were always kept sealed. They guided workers and peaceful creatures into safe hiding spots. And in some sectors, they shut down power. Systems to weaken the Empire's control. Every action they took made things harder for the Empire and easier for the humans who were approaching in space. The human fleet advanced with caution, but steady confidence. The commanders understood the value of every decision. They did not want unnecessary destruction. Their goal was simple: reach the children, protect civilians, and disable the Empire's ability to harm anyone else. The galaxy had already suffered enough under the Empire's rule. This moment was not just about humans anymore. It was about giving the entire galaxy a chance to finally breathe freely. As the fleet entered the Empire's main region, the stars around them glowed with strange colors. The Empire had placed artificial barriers in space, creating fields of light meant to confuse or mislead outsiders. But the human ships were ready. They had studied these fields, learned from them, and used creative strategies to navigate around them. The Empire expected humans to follow predictable paths, but humans rarely did what others expected. The closer the ships came to the main world, the more support they received from planets that had once been controlled by the Empire. Messages of encouragement, offers of help, and signals of rebellion poured in like a river. Species that had once stayed silent out of fear were now rising, inspired by human bravery and the children's quiet resistance. The galaxy was changing. When the human fleet finally reached the orbit of the Empire's core world, they found it surprisingly unguarded. Not because the Empire didn't want to defend it, but because so many of its systems had already been sabotaged by the children. The humans moved in quickly, sending small teams to the surface. These teams searched through long corridors, empty stations, and quiet rooms. Some rooms looked abandoned. Others still held signs of rushing workers who had fled moments earlier. And then, in one large hall, a human team found the children. The moment was overwhelming. The children stood together in a group, tired but hopeful. Some were holding hands. Some had tears running down their cheeks. And when they saw the familiar symbols of Earth on the human uniforms, a wave of emotion spread through the room. It wasn't loud. No one screamed or ran wildly. Instead, a soft, powerful feeling filled the space: relief, love, and the kind of happiness that comes after years of fear. The humans guided the children gently, checking if they were all right, offering comfort and telling them that they were finally going home. Some of the younger ones held on to the adults tightly, as if afraid it might all disappear. Outside, the Empire system continued to fall apart. But instead of collapsing into chaos, many planets began working together. They wanted peace, not more conflict. They wanted fairness, not control. And with the Empire's power fading, there was finally room for change. As the human fleet began its long journey back home, the galaxy around them felt brighter. Not because the stars had changed, but because hope had returned. The children sat in quiet rooms on the ships, watching space pass by. Some talked softly. Some slept for the first time in what felt like forever. And some simply stared at the stars, wondering what their future would look like now that they were free. Humanity had not set out to rule the galaxy. They had set out to save their children. But in doing so, they inspired an entire galaxy to stand up, to dream, and to believe in freedom again. The galaxy burned not with destruction, but with the warm light of rebirth, like a sunrise spreading across thousands of worlds. And as the human fleet moved through the stars, carrying the children back home, every world that watched them pass felt the same thing: a new beginning.